I am feeling rusty. It's been a while since I've made a video. I'm used to making them sort of 2 or 3 times a week, but it's been a couple of weeks since I've made one. This whole lockdown thing has had me a little bit unmotivated, but I'm getting back into it. The rules have loosened up a little bit. So yesterday I went out to the beach and I took this little Canon 200D Mark II, which the guys at Auckland Camera Centre lent me. Through this review I'll put a bunch of images that I took yesterday with this camera. I'm going to do the befores and the afters when I've edited them. They were all just edited with my preset pack. You can see that link in the description if it's something you're interested in. But yeah, I'll do the before and after so you can see the images straight out of the camera as well. I'm not really going to be talking about specs a lot in this video. You can look them all up really easily, compare the specs with other cameras. This is really just going to be my view on a beginner level camera from a professional photographer, and if I would recommend it to you guys. This camera has a whole bunch of different names depending on where you live in the world. In New Zealand obviously it's the 200D Mark II, I think in other places it's the 250D. There's a whole bunch of different names that Canon have for their cameras. I don't understand it, but nevertheless, it's a 200D Mark II here, and it's a great little entry-level camera. The reason I'm making this review is because a lot of people lately have been asking me what they want to get into photography, maybe being locked down at home, they've picked up new hobbies, and they want to buy their first camera. So they're not looking at the cameras I usually review, which are, you know, typically professional full-frame cameras or pro Fuji ranges or something like that. A while back I done a review on the Nikon D3500, which is kind of an equivalent to this camera. It has some features that this doesn't, and this one has some features the other one doesn't. But that was a really fantastic camera also, and I think it's actually a little bit cheaper than this one. So if you want to check that out, I'll put a link in the description and you can have a look at that camera for yourself as well. The reason I picked up the Canon 200D Mark II, I also actually have the Canon EOS M5, which is kind of the mirrorless equivalent. So one thing the Canon 200D Mark II has over the Canon M5 is the battery life is far better on the 200D. The M5 battery is actually pretty bad, but you know, it's a small mirrorless camera. It needs more power and it has a really small battery, so that's going to be an issue. I've heard reviews that maybe there's a firmware update that's going to come out and fix that a little bit, but you know, it's still a great camera, so I'll be doing a review on that as well. I actually shot my first wedding on a camera that wasn't too dissimilar to this one. So my first wedding ever was shot on a Canon 1000D twin lens kit. So it had the 18-55, which I have on this one here, and I also had the 55-200 or something. It was pretty limited, but it was my first wedding and I was just getting into it. So this camera is much better than that one, and yeah, I really like it. So first thing, talking about build quality, it's super light. It's really portable. I can actually get it in my hoodie pocket, kind of. You're not going to want to walk around with it like that. Looks like I'm pregnant a little bit. So it's definitely really portable. It has a nice grip on it. I have pretty big hands, but this one does feel nice to hold. You're going to want to be careful in the rain or anything like that. It's not really properly weather sealed or anything. But in terms of build quality overall, it feels plenty nice enough. It doesn't feel really super cheap. It does feel quite plasticky, but for the price, you know, you're not comparing it with a professional camera. I did find the focusing is better in live view, so when you are looking through the rear screen, it uses a different focus system, more like the Canon EOS M5. When you look through the viewfinder, it uses kind of a really old school focusing system and only has a couple of focus points, which aren't that great. But using it in live view, it actually works really well. One of the benefits of having a mirrorless system is obviously you have that little display in the viewfinder, and it uses really an entirely different focusing system. The downside to that is obviously you have to either have the camera held out like this, or you know, have the screen in, holding it like that, which isn't really comfortable, and you wouldn't want to be doing that for long amounts of time. One thing I really like about this Canon 200D Mark II is that it's actually really good at photo and video. Where I was looking at other cameras, I've been going over entry-level cameras trying to find ones that I'd recommend to you guys. The other thing I really like about this camera is it's actually really good if you want to get into making YouTube videos or vlogging or just even doing a little bit of video. I took a little bit of video when I went out for a walk as well, and it's actually really decent quality, so you can get some slow motion and full HD. It does do 4K video, but it's massively cropped. I don't think it's probably something you're going to want to do. With video focusing, I'd say it's probably just about as good as my professional Sony cameras. It does have the dual pixel autofocus, which is fantastic. It does have a touchscreen also, so you can use that for photo or video focusing. But it works really well with subject tracking, and in video or photo, when you're in live view, it does have face and eye detection autofocus, which is really nice. And honestly, it's a really impressive feature for a camera at this price point. It has a little flip out screen here so you can see what you're recording, which is really nice. It takes one SD card, so just in the bottom where the battery goes, and it also has a mic port, which again is really good for video because the inbuilt microphone isn't really great, and if it's windy at all, you're really going to pick up a lot of sound. So having a mic port is really fantastic, especially for a camera as cheap as this. The sensor itself, for the price of the camera, again, is pretty decent. I did find the D3500, the Nikon cheaper camera, had a little bit more dynamic range. You could pull back the highlights a little bit more, but this one's still plenty good enough. You'll be able to get some really nice landscape photography shots with it. The lens does have image stabilization, but if you're talking about video wise, when you're walking around kind of vlogging, it does still look quite shaky. One thing I found that was a little bit funny was it looks more stable on the LCD screen when you get it back in the video editing software or looking at the footage on a computer. It doesn't look as stable. I'm not sure why that is. Probably the first thing I would upgrade is the lens. It's fine, it's decent enough. The 18-55 on the Nikon D3500 was better. Still not a great lens by any means, but for a basic kit lens, I would be upgrading this to like the Sigma 16mm 1.4. That's a 24mm equivalent. 24mm, if you don't know, is my main lens for my full frame camera. So the 16mm would give you that same kind of field of view and a nice shallow depth of field. It's really sharp and all that kind of stuff. So that's a really nice lens to look at. There's a lot of other zoom lenses that are really good, but yeah, lens-wise, that would be the first thing I'd upgrade for this camera. One benefit that the 800D has over this camera is this one only has one dial. So if you want to use it in full manual mode, you have to hold a button and use the dial to change the aperture. It's not too big of a deal because the button is in a nice place, but I understand that's what the bigger cameras are all about. So it's not really a complaint, just something to note. I do like how the ISO button is on the top of the camera next to the dial, so it makes it really easy. You don't have to look down, you can just kind of feel where it is and change the ISO without any issues at all there. Another thing to note, if you're using this camera in aperture priority, a lot of cameras these days will allow you to set a minimum shutter speed. So on my Sony, for example, or on many other Canons as well, it's not just a Sony thing, you can put your camera into aperture priority, put your camera in auto ISO, and then you can set your minimum shutter speed so it's not going to drop below a certain speed. You can't do that with this one, so if you're going to use aperture priority and auto ISO, you're just going to have to keep an eye on your shutter speed to make sure it doesn't drop too low and you're getting blurry images. It does have a built-in flash if you really need it. It's probably not something I'd recommend using most of the time, but it does have a hot shoe if you want to use an external flash as well. So overall, the Canon 200D Mark II is a really fantastic beginner camera, and I would definitely recommend it, especially if you're looking at getting into photo and video or making vlogs or just documenting things around your home or whatever you like to do. Overall, I think the Canon 200D Mark II is a really great camera, and I think it's going to be a fantastic option for beginners getting into photography. Honestly, I think a lot of cameras around this range are really good. I am going to look into doing some videos on mirrorless cameras as well, so like the cheaper versions of the Fuji cameras, the Sonys like the A6400, and compare them a little bit, but they are more expensive than these ones, so I don't want to be comparing them when they're going to be out of a lot of people's price range. So I hope this video helps you guys out. If you have any questions, drop a comment below and I'll answer them as soon as possible. I'm pretty good at keeping up to date with the comments, but I do get notifications missing here and there, so drop a comment below, subscribe to my channel, let me know what you want to see next, and I'll see you in the next video.